Good evening. Today is Thursday, April 6th, and hopefully everyone is having a great week so far, going into the long weekend. It's Easter weekend. I didn't even realize it until earlier. So if you celebrate, hopefully you have a great Easter. I'll try to do an episode on Sunday too. But this episode, I'll get into the topic in a minute, but before that, I wanted to the full moon. That's what I wanted to talk. Um, the full moon is today, I believe. Yep, today's the full moon. So if you haven't already, and if you catch this or you already know about it, I'm sure you can do it after the full moon, but the effect is on the full moon is to do some manifestations, manifest some things that you've been looking for, hoping for, any answers. Meditate if you can. I had a great meditation today. Today I did the longest meditation I've ever done, and I didn't know that there's recorded meditations on Spotify. So I listened to a meditation today that allows you, it's called Meet Your Spirit Guides, and it was about almost 30 minutes that I meditated, and it was one of the best meditations I've ever done in my life. So definitely, just do whatever works for you on the full moon. If it's meditation, if it's spiritual bath, if it's writing things down in your journal, writing manifestations out that you hope for, you want to pray, speak to your spirit guides, whatever it is that you do. Definitely encouraged to utilize this time. It's a time of rebirth and going into the spring season, so new things to come. So being open to new things. And seeing what happens, and being open to the process and being open and accepting of whatever it is to come. So hopefully, like I said, it's the full moon today, April 6th. So if you can, use it to your best advantage. But yeah, today's episode is going to be, let me see, I pull it up. It's a combination of two things. That's why this one might be a little bit longer because it's about emotional development from children to adults. And not only is it just about being emotionally available, but also how to recognize someone who's emotionally safe. So I'm going to start off with the development aspect first and see, explain what that means, and then being able to recognize the success of emotional development in an adult, right? So the first one, these two things that I'm going to read off of, one is from Instagram and the other one is from Twitter. And so the first one I want to start with is the Instagram one, and she's from London, and her Instagram is at Hey Bobby Banks. It's Bobbi. I'll try to remember to post it or tag it, but she made a post a while ago that I had just saved in my phone just to talk about eventually. But it was titled "Children Who Didn't Develop Emotionally Become Adults Who," and then it's ... So we're gonna get into like some of the examples of adults who didn't develop emotionally, like children who experienced trauma and they just didn't grow up right emotionally. So and being able to recognize what that looks like in someone, and going from there and seeing, deciding if that's something that you want to deal with, right? I feel like a lot of these things, when we're talking about emotional development and emotional availability in adults, it can be friend related, but I feel like mostly it's definitely romantic relationships. And you have to, I think that in my opinion, you have to be somewhat emotionally developed yourself to be able to recognize someone who isn't emotionally developed, right? And I think a lot of the time, something that I'm realizing just with people in general that come into your life, they're mirrors. People are mirrors of you. So if you don't like something in someone else, you should take the time to see what it is about them and what they're doing that you don't like that's triggering you. Because a lot of the times people who trigger us and things that people do that trigger us is just the universe's way of telling us that we have a part of us that isn't healed, and we still need to get that healed, or maybe you haven't developed that aspect in yourself yet. So that's something to keep in mind. So the first one, it says example of an emotionally undeveloped children who become adults, right? So as adults, these people tend to rush to solve, dismiss, or invalidate feelings because they weren't taught how to cope with them. So if you have, you're dating someone or a partner or spouse or whatever it is the case, that typically they don't want to talk about their feelings. They just want to hurry up and, fix it, or just ignore it, or just invalidate it, right? And tell you that, oh, that's not true. That's not what I'm doing. But, when it comes to feelings, they're fleeting, and you have to respect that about others and yourself, right? Feelings can't dictate what reality is. They're so changing that you have to just, I've said that before, allow them to come and go, and not to necessarily allow your feelings to determine what it is. You can feel them, you can allow them, you can recognize them and acknowledge them, and even verbalize them and write them down, or whatever the case may be, but don't let them determine the actual situation, because we're human. And so if you have a partner who is dismissive of your feelings or their own feelings, or they tend to invalidate your feelings or their own feelings, and they just want to rush and solve the problem, like you present them with, hey, you know what, I didn't really like when when you did this and it made me feel, and they'll be like, okay, well, what do I have to do to fix it? What do I, like, instead of just saying, like, okay, like letting you speak and letting you say what it is. Because I think a lot of the times when someone is trying to rush, they just don't want to hear it, because they don't want to have to acknowledge that they've done something wrong, right? Even if they don't think it's wrong, it's still something that, if someone else thought it was wrong, then they just don't want to seem bad, quote unquote, right? And a lot of times it's just them telling themselves that they're bad. Everyone has done something wrong before. Everyone's hurt someone before. So we heard the term hurt people, and I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do, but we've all done it, not necessarily always on purpose, right? It's just being able to be mature enough to recognize that, hey, I got to step back and not, I got to heal. I got to fix this in me. I got to, and when I say fix, I'm saying that very lightly, because it's not necessarily something to fix about you, but more so heal the part of you that got hurt in the situation, so that you're able to present yourself the next time in a complete whole self, a whole version of yourself, especially emotionally. So that's one example. And then another example is they isolate themselves when they need emotional support, because they felt alone in their emotional world growing up. Now, this one is interesting because I literally listened to a podcast today, and he was talking about how isolation is not good, and how that sometimes, God doesn't want you to isolate. God wants you to go to your support systems, whether that be family, friends, or whoever it is that you feel is supportive of you. And also, more importantly, go to God. And the enemy wants you to isolate yourself. And when you tend to isolate yourself, you might start off thinking positive and being positive, but then those negative thoughts do start to creep in, and they start to interfere, and they can bring you down and kind of make your situation way worse than what it is. And it's hard to get out. Like I just talked about in the last episode, being in a rut. Sometimes the more and more deeper you get into that, the harder it is to get out of that, especially an emotional rut. You don't want that for yourself. And if you already struggle with emotional development and expressing your feelings and understanding your feelings, and then you put yourself in isolation, that's just a recipe for disaster, because then you're going to feel alone, like it says, and just potentially hurt yourself in various ways, and you're going to stunt your own growth, and that's not good either. So another example, emotionally undeveloped children become adults who feel empty, flawed, and like the odd one out because they were never truly seen or understood. I think this is a good one as well, because you see a lot of people, when I see this, I think about social media and there are people who really, really crave social media attention, and that's how they validate themselves, whether it be through, posting videos or pictures, or just having a certain amount of followers and friends and just being seen. That's an escape for them, and they can be a different version of themselves than what they are in real life on the day-to-day basis, and that can be dangerous because especially nowadays you have all these young people on social media, and that's just like the way of life, and you want to make sure that these children who will develop into, grow up into adults, are able to feel whole on their own, not looking for outside validation. Because like it says, you can end up becoming someone who's consistently empty and flawed, and like you're the odd one out. And when you're feeling empty, that means that your cup is not full. And if your cup is not full, then you don't have much to give to someone else. And then you can be looking for them to fill your cup and taking from them, and you become a draining person. You're not someone who's easy to be with and to love, right? Because if we're talking about being in romantic relationships, we always hear about you have to come whole, or at least come as the best version of yourself, versus coming, damaged and still hurting and not healed and not dealing with all the things that you've gone through, and then expecting someone to basically patch you up and fix you and deal with all your emotional trauma. And that doesn't mean that you have to come perfect, but you have to be able to take care of yourself first before you look for somebody else to take care of you. Because you should be coming in pretty much taken care of, and showing that you know how to take care of yourself. That's how you show someone how to take care of you and treat you. And then you guys work together on treating each other the way you want to be treated and creating a bond together, versus not knowing how to treat yourself, not knowing how to make you happy, and then making someone else play guess who of how to make you happy. That's not fair, and that's draining on both parties. And it's a sign of emotional immaturity. So another example is you struggle to communicate your needs because they were taught to please. Okay, so I'm sorry, let me read that again. Emotionally undeveloped children become adults who struggle to communicate their needs because they were taught to please others at the expense of themselves. So we hear that a lot about communication is key, and how a lot of adults struggle with communication, with simple communication, let alone complicated. And like I said, just kind of going back to it, the way we live today, everything is a text message, everything is a voice note, everything is a video, right? So you don't have to really, most people don't talk on the phone. A lot of people don't talk on the phone. Like, and even me, I've gotten into that stage of like, I'd rather someone text me than to have a phone conversation. But it depends on the person, because certain conversations and certain people I would rather have a phone conversation with. I'm technically a millennial, I think. So I'm in that space where I was there, when we had the house phone, and then I was there when we also started getting the cell phones and the computer and the text message and all that stuff. So I've been in both. I'm in that in between. So I've experienced both, and I don't have a problem. I feel like most people in that, like from the 80s, 90s, we are pretty well-rounded. We've experienced both spectrums, so we know how to communicate. Well, we should know how to communicate, but not everyone does. But for the most part, we've at least introduced to variations of how to communicate. And a lot of people, especially I think about like the younger generation, like the people who were born in the 2000s and up, like they don't They don't know how to use a house phone. They don't know how to use the rotary phone. They don't know anything about like VCR, stuff like that. So it's like that I couldn't imagine what that's like to be like that. And I'm sure they have their perks too, but um I say all that to say like there are different versions of communication, and the way at which we communicate in society is always evolving. And so keeping that in mind, it's like that's always evolving, but we as humans, we evolve to an extent, but we still have the basis of like we have emotions of love, hate, happiness, sadness, angry, like those things don't really change. And so you have to know how to not only communicate that to others, but also know how to understand it for yourself. Understand what it looks like and what it feels like when you're upset, when you're sad, when you're scared, when you're unsure, when you're angry, and like being able to recognize it, know how to deal with it for yourself, but also how to communicate that to others. And when you're communicating that to others, you have to be able to communicate what your needs are. Like, okay, I know that when I get angry, I need my space. I don't need someone telling me, oh, you should do like that's just going to elevate my anger. So I'm getting to a space where I'm able to communicate that, like, oh, you know what? I'm just not in the best headspace right now. So I'm going to need my space. And that's important to be able to create boundaries. And sometimes I can admit, like, my emotional maturity, as far as like even being able to tell people that, like, it's definitely developed, because I used to be the type of person that would be like, you know what? This person is irritating me. I will ignore them. Like, you keep texting me, I'm just going to ignore you until you get the picture. And then if not, then I'll block you. I'm not going to tell you. But now it's like in a space where I can be able to say, like, you know what? Even if I can't tell you what the problem is, I'm going to say I need my space. And then after that, if you still want to sit here and keep going, then I'm going to block you, because now I've already created a boundary and you're not listening. So I think, to get back to that, like just communicating and being able to say what your needs are. Say, I need space. Say, I need time. I need to think about it. I hear what you're saying, but I need time for myself to think about and understand and really process what's going on here and what I feel. And that's again a sign of emotional maturity in adults. So another example of emotionally undeveloped children who become adults is they struggle with feeling worthy and lovable because they didn't receive enough attention and affection. So this is another one where it's tough, and I feel like you can't invalidate if someone really did grow up as a child feeling like they weren't worthy and lovable, or their parents didn't give them enough attention and affection, and it impacted them how they grew, right? And sometimes we get stunted in growth, and even if you are physically growing and showing as an adult, you're emotionally still maybe that little 9-year-old girl or that little 7-year-old boy who parents were always working, or they didn't give you hugs and they didn't tell you they love you and stuff enough for you, right? Because everybody is different. I think that is something that I'm not a parent, but I would assume that you have to, it's hard to learn. Like, one kid might be super affectionate and super talkative and just very open and very easy to understand how they need to be loved. But the other child might be super timid and quiet and just like, you can't really read whether they're feeling good or not. And that takes more patience. And sometimes if you're a working parent and you got a lot of things to juggle, you might not have the time for that. But I think that's where, it's just kind of that thing where you just got to keep trying it. You just got to keep trying to figure out your kid and your child and figure out what works for them, because it's very detrimental to their health and their emotional health and growth. And so, but it's also important to teach them that you have to use your voice. I think that the more people who learn as young children to use their voice and express their emotions and not be told that, no, you need to do this, like being more open to listening. Kids are, children, we're born with a brain, right? And a brain that develops, and it should be encouraged, and it should be encouraged for people and children to be able to speak their mind and to say, I don't feel good, or I don't like this, or I don't like that person. It's so like, I feel like that's something that I think is starting to happen more nowadays with parenting, but it's still something, especially within certain cultural communities and cultures, that is just not accepted. Like, you're a kid, you don't get to say how you feel. But I think that nowadays that should be encouraged, because it's not just about how they feel, but it's like they got to feel, or at least for me, I feel like my child has to feel super comfortable to come to me with anything that they're going on, and they can tell me how they feel. I might not agree with it, but I have to at least listen and be open to that. And I think that if a lot of that was happening in parenting nowadays, then things might be a little bit different for people, and especially in terms of emotional development, right? Because like, I was listening to something and they were saying like, oh, you might have a situation with someone where you say something or do something to them, and they'll react in a way that okay, let me backtrack. So he was saying like, okay, you could be in a relationship with someone and you think they're very mature, like they're just mature, right? They handle things with maturity so far, but you might do or say one thing to them that triggers something in them, that, you might be talking to them, and you might talk to them in a tone or say something to them that has triggered them to feel how they were when they were like 7 or 8. And when they were 7 or 8, their parents or their mom talked down to them or talked to them like they were like kids, right? And so if you talk to them in that type of similar tone or way, even if they are 30 something years old, you're triggering them to come bring out that 7-year-old version of themselves who was not able to express themselves because maybe the way that they grew up, their parents said, you don't get to say how you feel, you just have to do it and deal with it. And now they're like, as adults, and they're like, no, I'm going to stick up for my 7-year-old self and say something or react the way that I really wanted to back then. And it's going to be, it's not your fault, but it's still something that can be recognized as like, okay, that person has certain triggers and traumas that still need to be developed, and their emotional development is not fully there yet. And so then you have to deal with like how to help them feel more worthy or respected, so that they can develop that 7-year-old version of themselves and heal that version of themselves. Hope that makes sense. So another example is they live in survival mode and have difficulty trusting or relying on others. I can completely relate to that, because I just think that for a long time, I've lived in survival mode, and sometimes you just catch yourself and you're like, okay, I got to do things a little bit differently. But it's hard. It's hard when you're just used to that, and if you may have witnessed family members live that way, or parents, or whatever the case may be. And it's hard to trust people and rely on people. That is something for me very, very big. Like, it takes a lot for me to trust and rely on someone, because unless it's like family, and even that is skeptical. Like, I feel like there's like a handful of people that I know that I can really rely on. Maybe not, maybe I would say trusting. I have a handful of people as well, but definitely reliability. And I think that a lot of the times that comes from, I feel like those wounds, that emotional undevelopment comes from your parents. Like, if you have a mom or a dad who just didn't show up, whether that be physically or emotionally, or they always said they were going to do something and they never did, you kind of learn. It's not even by a choice. It's just like the human design. Like, you learn to not rely on that person and their word, or trust them. And then you subconsciously just, pair that with adults that you come across in the future, and as an adult yourself, and throughout your childhood. And so it's like, it's hard to teach yourself how to get out of that survival mode. And it's very hard to learn the balance between, you can't trust everybody, but you do have to give people a chance. And you have to be able to use discernment to figure out who's worth giving a chance and who's worth even trying to trust and rely on. So that just, I feel like that just comes with time and that's comes with trial and error. And you start to recognize red flags and you start to pay, you have to, that's why I think something that I have learned just as a recent and past few years, you got to watch people's actions. Don't you can listen to the words, but watch their actions. Watch how they move and how they treat themselves, how they treat their family, how they treat their friends, how they treat strangers, how they treat you. Like, what do they value? How is their word worth anything? Or are they someone who just babbles and they never come through? Are they reliable? Are they trustworthy? Like, those are things that you really have to pay attention to, especially with dating and in romantic relationships. If you don't trust your partner and you can't rely on them in a sense, maybe for like emotional things or just certain little things, but maybe not rely on them completely, but you should be independent on your own. But relying on them to an extent, because that's the whole point, is like you're supposed to have that balanced person to balance you out kind of thing, then that's something that you have to really think about if that's something worth continuing on with. And the last one is emotionally undeveloped children become adults who react from their wounds because their experiences were never processed. So like I was saying, that example of you have a couple and the woman is with this guy and she thinks that they're both, he's mature, he's always seemed mature. And then you say something to him or you make a joke or something and you talk to him in a type of way that you get this reaction from him that's very childish, and you think it's childish, but it's actually his, that whatever age it was where, someone spoke to him that way, or he had an instance where he was not respected, or, whatever the case may be, he's reacting childish, but it's really the wound that you've triggered in him that he probably doesn't even recognize that he has. And he didn't process it. Maybe he didn't process it because he didn't know how to. He wasn't allowed to process it, or he didn't have the words of how to process it. So, and that's just something that, again, people should be given the grace and space to be able to heal those wounds, right? And I think that certain situations and people are brought into your life so that you can be able to recognize those wounds that you have that wouldn't really come to light unless you had certain interactions that brought them to light. And it's up to you as the adult to say, okay, well, this is clearly something that upsets me and still triggers me in a way that I need to dig deep into this and heal this, right? Whether that be through therapy or reflection or conversation, or just, talking to your younger self, talking to your inner child, and in recognizing and giving them that recognition that they are hurting and that it's not their fault, and it's okay, it's going to be okay, kind of thing, if that makes sense. So those were signs and things that you might see in emotionally undeveloped children that become adults. And so now I want to talk about and flip it over to 8 signs of an emotionally safe partner. So this is someone who, again, this probably still has their own forms of trauma, but they've maybe done more of the work to develop themselves emotionally. They've maybe gone to therapy or just done some extensive amount of self-healing and self-love, self-care. They know how to take care of themselves emotionally. So then they're able to be emotionally safe for someone else. That's another thing, is that if someone doesn't know how to take care of themselves emotionally in a safe way, they don't escape by using, alcohol, drugs, or, just having meaningless, or just having various like sexual partners, and just any type of thing that people might do to escape their emotions and their trauma. that's not really, I would say, an emotionally safe partner or an emotionally safe environment for someone. I would say someone who, they might experience something that triggers them and they deal with it in a more safer way. Maybe they tend to like retreat a little bit. They verbalize to their partners or whoever the case may be that, hey, you know what, I'm kind of going through something right now. I'm going to take some time to myself. I'm not angry with you. It's nothing that you did. It's just something that I need to process, and I will come back when I'm ready. And I can even, I'll tell you what's going on once I'm able to actually understand it. That is being like emotionally mature and emotionally safe with yourself, let alone other people, to bring yourself to your best version of yourself emotionally, right? So let me see the examples. Number one, second. Number one, they listen to feedback about themselves without becoming emotionally reactive or defensive. This is a big one. This is a big, big one. And I hate to be that person, but I have yet to see or meet someone who's done that. Like, including myself, because I've definitely worked on that. I've definitely worked on that because I used to be like that too, reactive and defensive, and still can be, but it really depends on the person. But if we're talking about in romantic, let's just stick to the topic of romantic relationships, right? So, a sign of an emotionally safe partner is number one, they listen to feedback about themselves without becoming highly emotionally reactive or defensive. I think that is great in a partner because that would create a space where your partner will feel like, all right, they kind of made me, that hurt my feelings, or they made me scared, or they hurt me, or they I felt like they just kind of blew me off, or they didn't really listen to what I had to say. And if you're able to communicate that in a respectful way, I think that that's something to key. You can't come at somebody crazy and think that they're going to be like, okay, well, yeah, like, no, you got to give what you want to receive. So if you're coming from an emotionally safe space and you are communicating emotionally in a respectful way, then you probably will get someone who can react in a non-defensive way and listen to what you have to say. And number two, they know when they're in a mood or just need some space and take it. They also allow the same for you. Big one, like I was saying. Someone who can say, like, you know what? They say to themselves, I'm not having a good day. And, or maybe you did something that really upset me, and I don't want to go off on you, and I don't want to create a bad situation or for us. So instead, I'm going to take some space. I'm not sure how long it will be, I'm not saying in this instance that you disappear for like weeks and come back. That's inconsiderate. No, I'm talking about like you maybe, oh, you know what, I didn't really like how you said that, or I didn't really like that the way you treated me, and I'm gonna need some space. I need to like take the rest of the day, or I'm gonna call you back tomorrow, or I'll call you back by tomorrow afternoon, whatever the case may be. I don't think you should go on for a long period of time, because that's unfair to the other person emotionally too, especially if you care about each other. So I think that taking a reasonable amount of time and space from each other is good, and that's why it's good to have space and to have your own lives, because then there's less room for situations where you feel congested or you feel smothered in a relationship. But also a big one, being able to communicate that I need space. Don't just disappear on people. Don't just shut down on people. That's not healthy. And that doesn't create an emotional safe space for a partner, because guaranteed, if you do that one time, the next time they're not going to tell you what's going on. They're just not going to tell you, or they're not going to feel comfortable telling you like, hey, you know what, you did this to me. Because if the last time they express their emotions to you and you shut down on them, or you shut them out, or you just kind of ghosted them for a few days, then they're gonna automatically think you're gonna do the same thing again. And that's not emotionally safe or mature. So number 3, when you're upset or express an issue, they're receptive and don't invalidate you by saying things like, "Oh, you're so sensitive," or "You're too needy." That is a big one. That's like a sign of, like I like kind of earlier, emotional maturity. If somebody responds to you telling them how you feel, because you determine how you feel. That's a big thing for me. Nobody can tell me how I feel. You're not in my skin. You're not in my soul. I'm the one who's experiencing it. So if I tell you, hey, that hurt my feelings, then it hurt my feelings. You don't get to tell me, oh, you're being sensitive. No, I'm telling you what it is. I said what I said. So if someone is always invalidating you or just not receptive to your feelings in that type of way, you might want to reconsider that, because that's an example of someone who is not emotionally safe. It's not an emotionally safe partner. Every once in a while, maybe you could be like, all right, if someone's reacting completely erratic and you're like, all right, you're doing too much, you're being dramatic, right? That's one thing. But if they always do that to you, you're going to feel like you're constantly always fighting to be heard. And who wants to do that? And that isn't a sign that can trigger that maybe a trauma or a past situation when you were a child that where you weren't being heard, and then that could just go down to a spiral. So number 4, they're genuinely interested in your emotional experience. They ask you how your day went, what an interaction was like, or how an experience felt for you. That is such a great thing. If you have a partner who's doing that, I feel like that is like one of the top things that you can do. It's more than just how was your day, but if they really care about how your experience was and what your feelings are, like if they're spending the day with you or something like that, or they went to an event with you or something, or maybe whatever the case may be, and they ask you like, no, how do you really feel, like how, like like they really care about your feelings in any situation, that's a big one. That's a really great green flag to me. Number 5, when they have a bad day, say something they regret or act in hurtful ways, they apologize. Big one. Somebody who can't apologize, that's like a burning red flag in my opinion. If you can't apologize, you can't acknowledge that you may have reacted in a hurtful way or said something hurtful, or you weren't being yourself, or you were just, even if you think that you weren't being hurtful, you still have to be able to be mature enough to recognize that if you don't think it's hurtful, maybe somebody else does. And that kind of goes back to the whole phrase of you're being sensitive. Like, you have to understand that maybe the way that you talk and the way that you maybe you're sarcastic, right? Or you grew up in a household where people were sarcastic and you always told jokes on people and made fun of each other. And then you come across a partner who you really love or whatever, but when you do it to them, they're almost in tears, or they're always acting like, oh, please don't, that hurt my feelings. And you think like, okay, you're doing too much, right? But you have to recognize that everybody's different. Everybody's emotional levels are different, and our feelings are different. And something that might hurt my feelings might not hurt theirs, or vice versa. So just being able to, even if you didn't mean to, apologize. And I think a lot of times that saves a lot of things, but people don't want to apologize. People have too much pride sometimes too. Number 6, you feel comfortable around them and you don't have to walk on eggshells or monitor their mood out of fear of how they'll react. Hypervigilance. This is a big one, because I think that relates to the childhood trauma. If you feel like you had parents who you had to walk on eggshells with, or you had to monitor your mood out of fear that you'll get in trouble. Like if you had a parent who, if you seemed to be angry or had a bad day, then that would make them get angry with you and give you a hard time, or you weren't allowed to be tired, or you weren't allowed to be sad or something, whatever the case may be. If you had to learn in your household or in your environment as a child to grow up walking on eggshells in those type of situations, then typically you will be like that as an adult unless it's healed. And then you also tend to unfortunately find partners who trigger that out of you. So finding a partner, having a partner who you don't feel like you have to be walking on eggshells around, especially when it comes to your emotions, is very important. Number 7, they cherish the quirky, unique parts of you and encourage you to do things that bring you joy. This is important as well because having the right partner, you will be able to just naturally be yourself, and whatever that case may be. If you're funny, if you're quirky, if you are, you like to just read a lot, or you like to do whatever it is that you like to do and how you are, typically someone who is the right partner for you and they really do have good intentions with you and they really do care about you and love you, they're going to love you for who you are, and it's going to bring them joy to see you be happy. So if you love to, I don't know, go to festivals or something like that, or you like to do art, or you like anime, or whatever the case may be, and even if your partner doesn't get down with it, they're gonna be open to doing it with you, and as long as they know that that's going to make you happy, because seeing you happy and seeing you and your bright element, from within, and expressing joy is going to make them happy. As long as you're someone who's also doing the same for them, you accept them for who they are and you enjoy who they are and their things that they like to do, right? And things that bring them joy. So it's that balance of, I know I can be my wholehearted self with this person, and I know this person is doing the same with me, and that's why we get along, and that's why we're a match, because even if we don't have the same things, it works. It just works, and we get each other. Number 8, they can have uncomfortable or tense conversations without name calling, shaming, or getting out of control. Again, a sign of emotional maturity and emotional safety in a partner. If you have a partner who's able to express themselves without being disrespectful, without getting loud, or making you uncomfortable, or name calling, or shaming you, getting out of control, or even like holding on to certain things, like if you have a partner who, when you maybe do something wrong and they bring it up to you, have a conversation, you apologize, and then the next time something happens they bring up the same thing, that's a problem, because we already acknowledge it and apologize. So even if, I'm not saying to sweep it under the rug, but it shouldn't be brought up again. So those are kind of like some manipulative tactics that someone who maybe not be emotionally mature would do. But an emotionally safe partner, again, like it says, that they are okay with having those uncomfortable conversations without calling you out of your name or shaming you or making you feel like you're less than or that you're a complete problem. It's more so they're having a conversation because they care about you and because they love you, that they want you to know that whatever the conversation is about, it's bothering them, and it's not to make you uncomfortable, and it's not to make things tense. It's to, hey, I'm recognizing a bump in the road here, and we need to both work together to get rid of it. So let's have a conversation and work through it. And that's a sign of an emotionally safe and mature partner. So I hope that this was helpful. I know this was a long one, but I just felt like it was a good topic because it's just something that, especially nowadays within dating and romantic relationships, and people who might already be in relationships, they're looking, searching, dating, whatever the case may be. There's just certain things that I know that I was able to understand from these lists because of experiencing things myself, and just through my own childhood and my own traumas and my own development emotionally, but also seeing it in other people and other various partners and people that I've dated, and just being able to, something that came to just mind is like, when you know better, you do better. And no one, again, is expected to be perfect. No one's expected to always get it right. But if you're making that conscious effort to do better and to be better, and it starts with yourself, you got to be in the relationship with yourself first, know how to love on yourself first, love on you, love you completely. Like it says, like, you have to love the quirkiness about you too, right? If if you're not comfortable being in a relationship with yourself and accepting your quirkiness and your whatever the case may be that you like to do and what makes you you and what brings you joy, then you're not going to be comfortable in the relationship showing that to your person, and then you're presenting a false version of yourself, and then you're just stifling yourself and you're preventing the relationship from growing. You're preventing that person from really getting to know you and to really loving you for you, and then you kind of create this windfall of issues because then that person's going to pick up on it, and they're not going to be able to be themselves. And then what is the point of being in a relationship between two people who aren't comfortable being themselves? That's the whole point, is that you have to show who you are so that you can be able to figure out sooner than later, hey, we are compatible or we aren't, right? So I encourage you to really learn who you are, be comfortable, and create a safe place for yourself, within yourself first, then be able to share that with someone else and know how to recognize when someone is or isn't emotionally mature, when someone is or isn't emotionally safe for you, and learn how to figure out what it is that you need to do in that type of situation. Are you worth staying, willing to stay and work with them through it? Or is it something that you have to kind of move on from and until you find the person that's the complete right match for you? What that you determine that. So I hope this was helpful. I am your host, Chanel. This is Black Hippie Lounge Podcast. And as always, meditate, manifest, invest in you.